I would like to suggest that the Chinese and the Russians are very pleased to hear all these stories, because last April, China put out a 20-page paper basically criticizing AID and pointing out some of these programs, which do not exist, by the way. And there's been just an intense propaganda move against US AID in the last 6 months of the Biden administration. There were 80 attacks on AID around the world by Russia and China. So, I mean, a lot of these stories about AID's silly programs are basically repeating what the Chinese and the Russians have been saying.
Donald Trump and his cost-cutter-in-chief, Elon Musk, are facing a setback on their plans to cut money from foreign aid programs, which the US president has accused of corruption. A federal court paused aspects of his plans to dismantle the US Agency for International Development, US AID, putting nearly 3,000 members of staff on leave. So where does that leave the agency, and is the blow to Trump only temporary? Let's speak now to Brian Atwood, a former administrator of the US Agency for International Development, otherwise known as US AID. He worked in the Clinton administration. Hello to you.
Good morning. How are you? Thank you for having me.
It's nice to talk to you. First of all, we're talking about the temporary hold that's been given on some of these plans on the US AID being demolished, but it seems to me it's already happened, hasn't it?
Well, they just took the major sign down on the building yesterday, and it's pretty sad. I mean, this is probably the worst self-inflicted wound I've seen the United States make since the Iraq War. This is a temporary hold, and I hope it becomes permanent. I know that there are members of Congress that are very concerned about what has happened, because AID is a statutory agency created by Congress, and holding its money and not allowing it to spend any is a violation of the Impoundment Control Act. So there may be some action on the Hill as well as in the courts.
Trump and Musk are both saying that it's riddled with corruption, USAID, that a lot of the money goes to pointless causes like plays about transgender issues and the rest. How much of that is true? How much of USA's budget goes to sort of contentious, woke activities?
Well, very little, if any. But the point here is, of course, that the administration has the right to review AID programs and eliminate anything it doesn't like or is not consistent with the administration's viewpoint. I would like to suggest that the Chinese and the Russians are very pleased to hear all these stories, because last April, China put out a 20-page paper basically criticizing AID and pointing out some of these programs, which do not exist, by the way. And there's been just an intense propaganda move against US AID in the last 6 months of the Biden administration. There were 80 attacks on AID around the world by Russia and China. So, I mean, a lot of these stories about AID's silly programs are basically repeating what the Chinese and the Russians have been saying. It's really kind of outrageous. The worst part of this is that the president of the United States is repeating them, but more importantly, saying things like, you know, we've put $50 million worth of condoms in Gaza. I mean, someone did a calculation. If at the price of condoms, that may mean that every male in Gaza would have had to have sex 325 times a day for a year. So, I mean, it's just outrageous, these things that are being put out. And the president of the United States putting his own name and prestige behind these claims. I mean, USAID is probably the most overseen agency in government. It's got inspectors general, it's got GAO, the Congress's arm, investigative arm, it's got lawyers, it's got the State Department overseeing its programs. And it's basically carrying out the will of Congress. So these kinds of charges are really outrageous, and it's not a nice thing for people who spent their lives toiling in some of the worst environments in the world, trying to provide education, healthcare, and other support to people. There's some 26 million people have survived as a result of the antiretrovirals for HIV/AIDS in Africa, and those people are going to die. It's just this is a horrendous situation.
I think I'm right in saying that the United States has been the biggest aid donor, although because of the size of its economy, although in percentage terms, the fraction of 1%, it spends well below the UN target. So what is the consequence if all this money stops being spent?
Well, the United States has been in the lead since the 60s in trying to convince other countries. Britain has done a wonderful job. It has on occasion gotten to the 0.7% of GDP. It's not there now. But,
I mean, the US is about, I think, 0.24% of GDP, isn't it something like that?
That's right. But the size of the economy means that 40% or so of the $230 billion each year that is provided for development assistance comes from the United States. So it's the largest donor in that sense. And the other issue, I think, is that when you work in a country that is weak and poor, you're working on trying to help them create economic systems that would attract foreign investment. The custom systems, the tax system, the banking system, the export-import laws. Once you can get to a certain point where the risk is lower, then foreign direct investment comes into play. So that $230 billion translates into 1.3 trillion by the latest count of foreign direct investment. And that has just changed the world. It's just changed the way the world operates. It's provided an opportunity for countries that were lower on the class scale up to middle class and participating in the global economy.
What's going to be the impact on suppliers in the United States who had a lot of the procurement from US AID?
Well, it's a tremendous. I mean, agriculture, we provide most of the food aid in the world. Agriculture will suffer. Any number of organizations that are helping to provide healthcare, education, environment work. I mean, a lot of think tanks and universities will be out, not able to function. I mean, it just happened as if the axe came down immediately, and, and all of these programs have been stopped. So that the impact is on those companies and organizations that have been working on foreign aid in the United States as well as in the countries that we serve.
Brian Atwood, formerly of US AID, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.